Hello guys, welcome back to another video, and today I have another deck highlight for you all. So if you watched my stream yesterday, Twitch link in the description, follow me over there if you want to catch my live streams, you will have seen the initial draft of this deck. I have since changed a couple cards, and I'll go over that, but for those who have not seen, I have a brand new deck, and this one is performing very, very well on ladder. Like, the last deck, the Soviet German deck, and a couple of the other decks I've been playing on ladder, like the Gerbrit discard, the Gerfin discard, you know, those decks are certainly good enough to hit, like, 70% win rate, like, probably stagnate around 2750, 2800. This deck is hitting, like, 75, close to 80% win rate, and it is cruising up to 2800, and it does not show any signs of stopping just yet. This deck is incredible. And what's interesting is it's a Sherman deck using Italy Ally. So yeah, let's jump into the deck, explain some of the cards that you can switch out, and then let's show off some gameplay on this deck. So a first look at this deck, you might think, oh well, this just looks like Frontline. You know, you have the 164ths, the For Freedoms, the Greyhounds, and the Shermans, and of course Strategic Bombing. And well, that is true. Those cards are all in this deck. That's really just to not get blown off the board early by the decks like France, or Japan, Germany. And, you know, these just like more aggressive board-centric decks where they're playing a lot of units, and you want to be able to fight for the board, because you're not really doing a lot in the early game, and you're certainly a lot less reactive than most other decks in the meta right now. Cards has gotten to a point where it's very, very lean in what cards you're running, and everything has to be incredibly reactive, and, you know, basically every single card you play is able to affect the board somehow. This deck is not that. Some cards in this deck can affect the board. Some things have blitz, some things have deployment effects, but a lot of them are just sort of big statted dudes, or cards that generate more stats and more dudes, which sounds like a really bad deck. Like, that typically doesn't work, unless like all of your dudes have guard and healing, like it's just Glamour Boys into ramp, and then you eventually hit big B24s and go face. But this deck just hits a very weird niche point where you are consistently able to get enough stats on the board quick enough that it can overwhelm mid-range decks as long as you do something in the early game. And you're able to generate enough of it that it can overwhelm control decks who might be easily able to remove the first or second wave of big stats, but can't deal with the third. So it's just able to hit that critical mass of total stat generation and value generation cards, while also getting it onto the board early enough that it can contend with aggressive decks, and it's right in that sweet point, in terms of just finding that line and balance between that. So let's look at some of the other cards in this deck. We have 4 copies of War Machine. This is your only ramp in the deck, and this is very, very crucial, because, again, everything is very expensive in this deck. Unlike the last deck I showed where there was 22 one-cost cards, this deck has an even number of 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then there's just a couple of important 5s in there that you're going to need to find as well. So War Machine, very, very critical card, because also just US and Italy don't have anything great on 2. I know that's kind of funny to say, because the one of the most played Italian cards in the meta right now is the 2K Fiat, but that's entirely because of Claim the Skies, and we don't have Soviets here. So really, there is just most of the 2-drops in this deck, actually all of the 2-drops in this deck, are just reactive orders that don't really affect the board all too much, or require some sort of board presence, or they're War Machine. So yeah, there's essentially no 2-credit units. There's nothing that you're playing on turn 2. There's no sudden strikes, there's no 35Ts, there's none of that. So 2 is the turn where you want to be playing the War Machine. Or, if you have a couple 1-drops, you can do like a Greyhound for Freedom, 164th, that kind of stuff, and set up for the Calliope on turn 3. Well, yeah, Calliope is sort of the card that you want to be hitting on turn 3 most of the time, and whether that's hitting it on turn 3 with 3 credits or on turn 3 with 4 credits, Calliope is going to be a massive card at helping you stay on board against decks like France and Japan, Germany. And 4 copies of Calliope, it does count as a Sherman, which is important. We will get to that. And then another card that we have in here that you're probably not going to be playing on turn 4 because it's not going to trigger the deployment effect, but the 49th Infantry Regiment, there's 3 of those in here, and that's going to give you a little bit of reactivity. 4 credits, hit 4 damage in the front line. And also, it's going to give you a bit of healing in there if you do have another 4 or more attack unit, which most of the units in this deck are 4 or more attack. So that's going to be quite good. And then we also just have like a single copy of Dagger Strikes. This is just pretty straightforward. Sometimes you have a bad hand. Sometimes your opponent's going to like slam down a Dragon Slayer. Sometimes a game might go late against control and they get down a guarded B24D. Single copy of Dagger Strikes, it's just a pretty solid card to have in there. The Pontoon Bridges, as we will see, we're about to get to a whole lot of 2-operation 4-attack tanks. So there's 2 Pontoon Bridges in here just to help make the deck slightly faster. This was the addition that I did since my live stream of this deck, is I just really wanted to find a way to fit in Pontoon Bridges, so I took out a Dagger Strikes and a 49th Infantry. Both of these used to be max copies. I took those out for Pontoon Bridges. Again, there's a little bit more refinement that could be done with this deck. There's so many cards you want to put into this deck that we'll get to. But certainly 2 Pontoon Bridges have been feeling pretty good since making that change. And then moving down, we have the 62nd Armored Infantry. So this is the 4-cost 4/4 infantry that gives all of your Shermans +2/+2, and if you have done, it adds an M4 Sherman, the Sherman that draws cards, if you could have a US unit in the front line, to your hand. And this guy is absolutely important, not to be played necessarily early. Now, obviously, if you don't have an M4 Sherman in hand, and you, especially if you went first, you are going to want to find that card draw. That is, oddly enough, the biggest issue with this deck is card draw, because if you just whiff on the Shermans, then you're gonna just run out of cards relatively quickly. Then, of course, we have 4 copies of the aforementioned M4 Sherman. I would love to be able to go down to 3 copies of this. But it's just, the card draw is so critical, and if you miss, sometimes you'll have too much, but if you miss the card draw, the entire deck sort of starts to fall apart. So, 4 M4 Shermans, 3 60-seconds to generate more Shermans, or to buff the Shermans you have, and that's probably going to happen more often than not. And then the 4th Sherman that we have in the deck, so we have Calliope, we have the M4 Shermans, and then I guess the 3rd Sherman type, we have the Armored Infantries, which give you M4 Shermans. We have the M4A2, and this card is quite critical. So, just on its own, like, you'd love to play this on turn 4, turn 5, depending on if you hit War Machine. It's just a solid play. 4 credits for 2 4/4 tanks. Now, they both have 2 operation costs, so they're really slow. It's 8 credits to move an attack with both of them. But, you just play that on turn 5. Your opponent, in the meta right now, there's so much where you play a unit, and then your opponent immediately removes it for less than you played it for, and that's sort of how the meta works right now. Is there's the tempo decks that are trying to remove things and gain a tempo advantage in the process, and then there's the decks that just try to play things to not die. M4A2 is really good in that, because if your opponent plays like a Schutzen to trade with it, or they play like a Tactical Strike, or they like trade into Zerstorer, you just come out on head. You come out ahead because you have 2 guys. And there's not a lot of cards in the meta that really can take out 2 things at once. The big AoE that's popular right now is Crossfire. It's very difficult for your opponent to Crossfire on 4 with this deck. They have to do a lot of trades to get that to happen. And if they are trading with you, then you are kind of going even, because again, you played a single card, and now they're using the Crossfire plus trading with you to get rid of your single card. So you really just come out ahead with M4A2 every time you play it if your opponent trades. Now, the issue is you play M4A2 and then your opponent goes face, because their units are 0-op and your units are 2-op. And that's where things like the Pontoon Bridges are going to come in helpful, and that's why there is a copy of the Victory March. Well, it's a delete, but that's why we have Victory March in the deck, is so often you will just have 4 2-operation tanks in your support line, and your opponent just starts going all face, and then you slam Victory March, you heal 8, and you essentially gain 3 credits for free because you spent 5 credits on Victory March, and you now get to operate 8, and probably 16, depending on how the trades are going to go down. So you might have just netted 11 credits on top of 8 health, which is a very, very powerful card. Then, of course, we just have Strategic Bomb because it's there. And now let's talk about the 2 cards that I have skipped. So the 2 cards that we have skipped, and the main reason that there's Italian Ally. The first one is the B26 Marauder. This one is going to trigger all of your non-targeted deployment effects a second time. Now, the only targeted deployment effect in this deck is the Calliope, but the 49th, that will heal you 8. M4 Sherman will draw you 4 cards. M4A2 will summon a second M4A2, so, well, a third M4A2, but it will be summoning a second one. So you will get 3 if you play that with Marauder. And the 62nd, you will get 2 M4 Shermans to your hand if you don't have any Shermans on board. And if you do have Shermans on board, those Shermans are going to get +4/+4. And you can start to see where the craziness is going to come in, because the last card that we are looking at here, the sort of the crux of this deck, is Air Escort, the new Italian card, which triggers all non-targeting deployment effects on friendly units on the battlefield. So it's just going to be 2 credits, trigger all your deployment effects that are already on the battlefield, which is much easier to set up than Marauder. Because Marauder, you have to play it for 4 credits, and then you're probably going to have to play it the turn before you do the deployment effects, so that your opponent's going to have an opportunity to suppress it or kill it. And then even then, like, you're still sort of spending the credits, and like you want to get the Shermans on board, and then you want to buff the Shermans, but now they can't attack. All of that is quite complicated. But Air Escort, if you have like a Calliope and 2 M4A2s on the board and an armored infantry, what you can do is you push the 2 M4A2s to the front line, and then you play Air Escort. And what that Air Escort will do, it will summon 2 more M4A2s in the support line, because each one will trigger its deployment effect an additional time. So each one summons a new M4A2. And the armored infantry will then give +2/+2 to all of the Shermans. So it'll give +2/+2 to the M4A2s that you pushed to the front line that can attack. They're now 6/6s. It will give +2/+2 to the Calliope that you had on board. And depending on the order that it triggers in, which seems random, it might give +2/+2 to the M4A2s that you summon in the support line as well. It might also draw you cards if you have Sherman. If you need a bit of extra healing, if your opponent's trying to race you down, you can start stacking up additional healed triggers on the 49th Infantries. And also, you can play 2 of them in the same turn, because it's a very cheap card to play. So if you're playing against like a deck like, say, Britain, where they don't have any full board resets, there's no Depths of Winter, or US would be another good example of this, where there's no Leopold, there's no Depths of Winter, there's no To the Last Man, there's not any cards like this, where you could just slam down like 2 or 3 Air Escorts and just make a whole bunch of like 8/8 or 10/10 Shermans, and then your opponent's just going to surrender, because they might be able to pin one, they might be able to suppress one down to a 4/4, but they can't deal with everything all at once, and it's just 2 credits. And also, the reason Beast 26 is in the deck, you might be wondering, well, like, why is it even in the deck then, if it's really hard to use because you have to have it on board. So if you play Air Escort, when you have B26 Marauder on the board, it is actually going to do a ×2 effect on the Air Escort for things like, say, the 49th Infantry or the Armored Infantry, where it's going to give +4/+4. It's going to give you 8 health, because that deployment effect is triggering twice. It will be triggered once by the Air Escort, and then it will trigger a second time. Because it's being triggered by Air Escort, it will now trigger a second time from the Marauder. Alright, so that is the deck list. Now, obviously, there's a lot of cards you might be wondering about, well, why aren't they in here? So, for example, Bomber Mafia. We're running War Machines. Bomber Mafia is just one of the best cards in the game if you're running any type of credit game. It's just a really solid card, because odds are, you can play this on turn 7, turn 8, it's going to be an AoE effect, and you're going to develop into a big bomber. The reason I'm not running Bomber Mafia is twofold. One, you're not really going to be dealing with a lot of, like, a wide boards from your opponent by turn 7, turn 8 most of the time. Like, if your opponent's the type of deck that's going to be going wide with lots of small units, the game will probably be won or lost well before turn 7, turn 8. The second issue is the bomber that you get has 0 synergy with the rest of the deck. So while it's good value, this deck doesn't really lack value. You're going to have like an infinite number of tanks coming at your opponent. What this deck lacks is tempo, and Bomber Mafia is not a particularly good tempo card when you're not also running like a lot of credit gain in the deck. Some other honorable mentions would be something like War Bonds, because again, this deck does need a lot of credits. The issue with War Bonds is you need to be playing units well before this point. In time, some other options are, again, second Dagger Strikes. This would be a card that I would... I mean, it was previously in the deck, if you can find a way to put it in the deck. Line for a Day, another just solid option. I'd probably prefer Dagger Strikes a little bit, because honestly, oftentimes you're playing it on turn 3 to just remove the biggest unit your opponent has on board before you go into just playing your Sherman's cards. Medical Battalion seems a little greedy to me. The other option would be Supply Priorities. This just seems like a really solid card. There's often times where you could get a lot of value out of the heal part of this, if not the 1 damage to everything part. But just the issue is already you're dealing with card draw problems, so putting in low-cost tech cards that don't really, they're not cheap US units to get to the front line. You might wonder, well, you can like take out the 164ths for the supply priorities because they're doing the same thing. 1 credit, deal 1 damage to an enemy unit. But the issue is 164th can be pushed to the front line to trigger Shermans, which is very, very important for this deck. So yeah, there's a ton of cards that I would love to fit in this deck. The other one would be any form of suppression, like a Duress or an M10, but again, they just don't have synergy with the cards already in the deck. So it's, what cards do you put in? What cards do you take out to put it in? I'd say like the most cuttable cards would be the B26 Marauder. A lot of decks you're probably not going to need this to win. Like it's just a bit of a win more card. You could feasibly go down to 3 War Machines if you're feeling very comfortable with that. I'm not sure I would, but those are probably the cards you could look at cutting. Maybe going down to 249ths if you're not feeling any pressure about the healing, but that I feel like healing is kind of important. So that's why this deck list looks the way that it is, but those are a few cards where, if you're missing certain cards or, you're just finding that you are running into a lot of a type of deck, a certain type of deck, and you want to put in more cards to help beat that deck, those are the types of things to be looking for those are the types of cards that you might want to put into this deck if you are going to make changes to it. But enough talking about the deck. Let's actually get into the games. And once again, to show I'm not playing in casual. I'm not just like at some very low rank where, any deck that I play is going to get a ton of wins. I am currently 19th on ladder, 2,800. My highest point I've been this season. I'm up like 150 points on this deck. It is working out really well. So let's get into some games and showcase the deck.
What a performance there by J-King.
J-King, full plot armor.
J-King is pushing himself into the ranks of the legend.
J-King is our world champion!
J-King 7!
What? The back-to-back Cards world champion!
Alrighty, USA. We're keeping the War Machine. And honestly, I just keep M4 Sherman in my opening hand, even if I don't have anything else to go with it. Because there's a few silly interactions that you can do with Air Escort. Where you can play M4 Sherman on an empty board. It's not going to trigger, but then if you push it to the front line and play Air Escort, it will trigger off of itself. So you don't actually need to, trigger Sherman when you play it, because there's going to be times where you can trigger it when it's already on the board. So there's certainly times where you just play M4 Sherman to get the unit. This is probably not one of those times. So let's do this. This way he can't clear the board with Crossfire. And we should be able to guarantee an M4 Sherman draw. The reason I'm playing it this turn is you want to be very credit efficient with this deck. You want to be able to... You realistically want to be using all of the credits you can in the early parts of the game. That's perfectly fine. We'll just take another draw with our Sherman. Later in the game, actually, ironically, you're perfectly fine being very credit inefficient later in the game, because a lot of times you will have just a number of units on the board that will kill your opponent in like 2 turns, and your opponent's just going to be like making very inefficient plays. Like, they'll spend their entire turn taking out one of your like 3 Shermans. And you will have the credits to just play down more Shermans onto the board. You shouldn't do that against a lot of decks, because your opponent is essentially going to lose the game if you just continue hitting them with what's on board and putting on minimal additional units on board and making them deal with it one at a time, or use a very inefficient board clear. If you just fully commit to the board, then you could get blown out by things like Leopold or Depths of Winter, those types of cards. Here's a very interesting situation. We're not really under a lot of pressure from our opponent, so we could just play an M4A2 and War Machine. It's also possible, like, we can take the front line. I think I'd rather get out the War Machine here. Let him come to us. These, shock infantry from Finland can be very scary. The very original version of this deck did actually include the M4A1, the Sherman that draws itself when you discard a unit. And the reason I eventually took it out, or I very quickly took it out, I should say, is it just didn't have synergy. It didn't have deployment synergy, and I needed to make cuts to this deck to fit in all of the synergy cards that I wanted. So we will just take this trade here. Jurfin is... they're very reliant on Crossfire for their AoEs. So as long as we just don't give him a great Crossfire, and also don't get under too much pressure from something like a Comet, a lot of his cards are just going to trade 1-for-1 like that. Alright, if we push up and hit, we are giving him a halfway decent Crossfire. Alternatively, we can strategic bomb in Calliope. We kill this 75% of the time. We limit the credit slot. It's a little slow. It's not taking the just absolutely beautiful value trade on this Finnish boys. I think we'll go for the card draw. And we will push up, it doesn't really matter. Because, you know, he's probably going to crossfire this. Discards a second M4A2. That's perfectly fine. Second finish, boys. No crossfire. Holds up 3 credits. Okay, we finally draw an air escort. He has not played a off-clung, so if he does have a countermeasure, it's just raw in the deck. I think we still play around it, though, and do strategic bombing in and then Sherman. And we're just going to get the surrender. That's kind of fair. Our opponent is in a very bad position, and I've actually already played against that particular player earlier today, like, you know, half an hour before I started recording. So he knows what's in my deck, and he lost pretty badly the last time we played, so he's just sort of getting that over with. And we're just going to get immediately into another game. Another Germany here. And most likely a France. We'll keep Greyhound, mulligan the rest. Okay, this is an interesting hand. No War Machines and no Calliopes and no M4 Shermans. So, a bit of a scary hand. We do have 260 seconds, so we have ways of getting more Shermans, certainly. Now here's an interesting question. Do we push and hit face with Greyhound, or do we 164th and put both into the front line? We don't know the ally yet. If it is France, he could... and it absolutely could still be France, because he would want to Arado, because he couldn't Dragons and then Arado. And he can't Arado and then Dragons. So if I push up Greyhound, he could have Dragons and Aunt Frida and then trade into Greyhound. Problem is he can still do that even if I just also play 164th, and then I just have a stranded 164th on the following turn. So I think we do just Greyhounds. And attack face here. Top deck Dakshu, very, very good card for him, because we don't have Suppress, so there's not really going to be a way of getting rid of that. I could just play down a 49th to get a unit on board. And I do kind of think that's going to be worth it. My worry is that it's going to set up a crossfire in the near future. The alternative is we just hit face, and, 35T errata hit, push. Things can start to get pretty scary pretty fast. I like the 49th as the follow-up for the Armored Infantry, because we're probably not going to be able to Sherman on turn 5, but on turn 5 we can trade, play 49th, trade, and then potentially 164th Sherman, or trade 164th Sherman on the following turn. So I think we just hit face. Obviously I do have two 49ths, so I could have played out one of them, but I think we know on the following turn that we're just going to be doing this. So we wouldn't really have credits to operate a 49th on board. And our opponent's just going to be straight ramping, so not Jer France at all. Alright, let's just get units on the board, get some card draw, and get some units to the front line. I've seen very little veteran Schützen lately, so hopefully, this is not the exception to that rule. Alright, War Machine, Blitz Doctrine. This does mean he could Leopold next turn. The question is that something that we want to play around? Or do we just want to put pressure onto our opponent here? So I think we're pontoon bridging, and then we're hitting our opponent for 9, certainly. Strategic Bombing's a very good draw if I want to stop the Leopold potential. The issue is that doesn't really stop the stuff like Panzer 4H triggered Akshub. I do think I will Calliope over attacking with the Greyhound here, so let's put that damage into the face. We're setting up the strategic bombing on the following turn. Our opponent might just slam Leopold. Slams Bomber Mafia. He can crossfire to clear the board, but then he's not really using credits on the following turn. Or he's not using the credits to get more units onto the board, I mean. Okay, so no crossfire. Panzer Grenadiers loses the combined arms. Nakshub's triggered already. He's just dead unless he has one credit. Suppress will keep him alive. Alright, we'll do this. It forces him to have Alpenfestung. Which he could absolutely have. He could just slam Alpenfestung here, but that gives us a pretty decent chance of winning, if he does. Top deck Leopold is not enough to survive, and that is going to be a second pretty quick victory for this deck. This is why I think the pontoon bridges were such an important addition to this deck, is it does just allow you to get a bit more aggressive, which can be very useful against some of these heavier, greedier control decks. So, just like that, we are cracked into the top 2800, top 16. Let's play some more games. Alrighty, we have a Soviets, so we're just going to keep Calliope, mulligan the other 3. The cards that you're looking to keep basically every time are Greyhound, 164th, War Machine, M4 Sherman, Calliope. Now, obviously, you're not going to keep multiple copies of any of those, except for, maybe 164th if you're going second against Japan, or if you already have, War Machine, Sherman in hand. And, even if Calliope's, obviously Calliope's amazing against Japan, it's not much against, Soviet decks, typically, but it doesn't have to be, the greatest thing in the world. just getting it on the board forces your opponent to have something to react to. It's a unit you can play without needing to, like, it's an unconditional unit you can play. You don't need other stuff on board. Our opponent draws last. And let's do it in this order to avoid healing him 1 extra. Our opponents have really liked emoting today. It's interesting. The worry against Soviets is that they're going to have early claim this guys to shut down your Calliopes, but even if that happens, you kind of just have to keep playing them so that they spend their credits trading into Calliopes so that they eventually die. You don't want to take too much early damage, because this deck has healing, but it's not the best healing in the world. It's not the most reliable healing in the world, so you do want to avoid taking too much unnecessary damage against Soviet Italy in the beginning of the game, because once you're later in the game, it's all about just baiting out their removal. Like, they have a very limited number of removal, and the removal they have is excellent. It's probably going to full clear your board twice, but they only have 2 full board clears. So as long as you don't just overcommit to the board and get value out of it, their actual units are kind of hard to use. They're very easy to just out-tempo. Well, let's start with the M4 Sherman, and then we'll Pontoon Bridge and take out the Breda. Breda's not a card that I've seen a whole lot of. I think this might be like the 2nd or 3rd time I've ever seen it played, and never has it been in Soviets. Okay, 0 cost 4th Cards. That's pretty good. This would be an excellent time to top deck our only copy of Dagger Strikes. Or Strategic Bombing would be an excellent draw here. Unfortunately, we get neither of those. I think we're just going to go for another M4 Sherman. There's a couple good cards we could draw into. We could Air Escort here to draw 6. If we want to get silly with it. The great thing about these types of positions against Soviets is they're forced to, like, it's a bit more awkward when they get a lot of air units. Like, here you could strategic focus for ground units. He does damage his 4th guard, so, like, maybe we should have traded, but, you know, it's still, like, a decent situation. He's not really using his other credits. We slam down an M4A2. If 4th guards moves up, we 49th it. But, like, you know, he can't really play Depths of Winter here. Like, he gets rid of some Shermans, but he also loses his 3 units he put on the board, and then we're just coming out ahead because our units drew cards, whereas his didn't. Alright, Strategic Focus, or Strategic Bombing is still a very good draw. It's a tad too late. If I Strategic Bombing and push up 164th, we go down to 6 cards in hand, then we play Air Escort, we go down to 5 cards in hand, and then we draw up to 9 and heal. That's pretty good. We overdraw 1 card, but that's not the end of the world. We're getting the draws in. I think War Machining is better, though. Because, like, even if he full clears this board and we lose out the potential of drawing with these Shermans, we have another Sherman in hand. And also, we don't need that much more card draw. Like, immediately. Like, we have enough cards in our hand to play the game for at least the next, like, 4 or 5 turns easily. Alright, Buy the Sword's gonna refill the hand. Other Claim the Skies lets him clear out the front line. Especially because he just won the... Doesn't take the clear in the front line. It's a very bold strategy. And we draw the Punish. Alright, let's draw some cards. Do we want to get a bit more healing? Let's get a bit more healing, actually. Two credits, draw 4 cards, heal 8. Sincerely yours has nothing on you. Okay, so we're taking this trade for sure. I don't think I really care about this Fiat. Like, I'm certainly not hitting Sherman into it. The question is, do I push here or not? And I think we do. I think we just push up. Like, he's at an obnoxious amount of health, but he's still on 8 credits. He can't front formation. Even if he could front formation, it would probably be too early. Okay, well, I guess that's a punish for leaving it on board. I suppose we might have to worry about, like, Regia Aeronautica or something. This guy seems to be a much more air-focused style of deck here. Ooh, I would love to go for Calliope 60-second. That's probably overcommitting to the board just a little too much. Maybe not, though. Alright, we got the split, which is good. Now we could do this. We'll take the trade. Go face. And do I want to turn Pontoon Bridge into 7 damage face, or do I want to save it? Because he's probably just going to clear the board with Depths of Winter. The nice thing about this situation is it kind of has... Well, I suppose Strategic Focus takes out everything but the Sherman, so Strategic Focus Sickle clears. Alright, he has the depths. They always have the depth. It's really funny. Like, we're still in a very perfect situation, but, like, you know, they never don't have the Depths of Winter in the top half of their deck. Alright, do we want to Sherman or Sherman? I think we want to Sherman. So, let's get this guy down. And let's get the second guy down as well. He could strategic focus us. That would be obviously very, very bad. I mean, it's also possible that he can just, like, remove a decent chunk of this board without needing to go for strategic focus. Okay, our opponent is cooking. Claim the skies at number 3. Did he claim the skies on a 1-1? Okay. Bizarre. So we can't actually remove Breda unless we win the quite unlikely Calliope. Okay, I feel like we should be killing the 392nd. Alright, things are starting to take a bit of a turn for the worse. We have at least one M4A2 left. I think we have 2 M4A2s. We have the Marauder, and we have 2 Air Escorts. So even though we only have 10 cards left in deck, we have a lot of board generation left. Our opponent's also out of Claim the Skies, so now his units are forced to trade 1 for 1. Ooh, I don't think that this is worth dropping a claim on. I could air escort. It's a very weak air escort. I think I'll just drop a war machine. This Breda is putting in the work, because our deck doesn't really have any blitz cards. I'd love to run the Grasshopper, the 1/3 fighter that gives Sherman's blitz, because both it's a fighter, so it can block bombers, as well as it can give the deck a bit more reactive opportunities, but alright, that's a absolutely massive punish for not dagger strikes in the previous turn. We can remove Breda. Not easily, but we can remove it. Now, the question is, do we go for the M4A2 or do we go for the 49th? I think we go for the 49th. And I could air escort for an M4 Sherman and a bit of extra healing right now. I'm going to hold on to it. I could also dagger strikes just to pin. I'm going to hold on to that. Hopefully there's no strategic focus, but... Okay, strategic focus, Naval Brigade? Would be my guess. Second mobile defense. That's fine. It only guards one of them, so we can make the trade on the 4 health one. And we'll probably drop an M4A2 air escort, just create a huge board. Depths is gone, so health does matter a little bit. Like, the health of units matters a little bit, I mean. Now, I'm almost tempted to do both, and then not dagger strikes. Does that matter? We go to 10, he has a 5 attack Machi on board, but that's both Machis. If T-34 ever enters the front line, we're dead anyways. We should be able to comfortably kill Machi on the following turn. Now, I don't think we play both. Ooh, but actually, do we have to trade first? No, actually, we're not playing dagger strikes. Alright, we didn't trigger it in the way that we wanted to, but we have the second one left in hand. Strategic focus takes out his tanks as well. As long as he doesn't have, like, naval engagement, that would be pretty backbreaking here. But he's running Bredas, so I find it a little hard to believe that he can fit in naval engagement into this deck. Okay, he's upgrade. Okay. He wins the 50-50 to be able to drop his dagger strikes. It's an interesting trade. So here's actually an interesting play. I think we do this. So we can drop the dagger strikes. And then buff the other guys. I guess we could have gotten Greyhound down for 1 extra damage. Strategic Focus doesn't clear on its own. This is like a pretty decent board to just slam like a T-3485. Tractor Factors. Interesting. Well, it's about that time to just send everything to the face. I guess I should have held on to Greyhound. That was a mistake. Because he can Strategic Focus, clear out the ground units, and then I play M8 Greyhound on the following turn to get a unit to the front line. Okay, 52k. So he doesn't have Strategic Focus. Probably going to make this trade to heal 6. Maybe he has Naval Brigade. That would be pretty backbreaking here. We have a second, we have a third air escort left in the deck, I believe. We're out of armored infantry, absolutely. I think we have an M4A2 and an air escort left in the deck, if I recall things correctly. Goes face. I mean, we have to try to end the game. I think we leave Yak alive. This is going face for sure. This is going face for sure. The question is, do I trade? Like, he might run a third, or a second Yak. If I don't go face, can I win? He trades here. I'm one off lethal. I think we go face. What 3 damage is he gonna have? He doesn't have Strategic Focus or Naval Brigade in hand, or he'd have infinitely better plays on the previous turns. You could top deck either one of those. Heroes of the Soviet Union could get Naval Brigade. Alright. Well, we're 2 off lethal. We're 1 off lethal, because he didn't take out the Greyhound. I think we've played both for freedoms. Our opponent's going to surrender because he doesn't realize the attack is coming from the Greyhound. And that's going to be a win. Perhaps not the most deserved win, but a win nonetheless. Let's take a look at our opponent's deck. No Strategic Focus in the list. No Naval Brigade in the list. Corson, Armored Train, just big guards would have been a issue. A separate bin. That's kind of wild. Yeah, Red Dawn. So yeah, there were... Okay, that game was perhaps a less... I think we had a much higher chance to win that game than I originally expected, upon seeing his deck list afterwards. And let's move my camera over here, and get into the next game. Alrighty, we have a Germany. We're keeping Calliope, keeping 164th, keeping for freedom, because we have a 1-drop. Hopefully we find War Machine or Shermans. Kornilov. I've played against this guy a lot this season. I do not have any idea what he's playing. Okay, he passes on 1. If I 164th, it could give him an errata target. It is unlikely that he passes on 1 and then has a way to kill this on 2. That's not like Sunstrike or Through the Breach, and if it's either of those, I don't care. Yeah, that's fine. I'd rather for freedom on the Calliope anyways. It's a good thing that he didn't have like a Ratto Through the Breach. That would be a bit of an issue. Well, I guess we are not getting our for freedom after all, but Alright. I don't think, like, unless he has, like, dive bombing, um, into, okay, he's got both of them. That should still be fine. Discards pontoon bridge, that's whatever. Discards the armored infantry. I think I'd rather he discarded an M4A2, but does not matter a whole lot. Let's just take out one of these, not make the trade for him. Make him spend credits. He's low on cards in hand, so make him spend credits, doing stuff. Is he gonna Comet face? Okay. Ooh. Now here's a question. Do we leave that on board for a turn so that we can M4A2? Like, what's the 4 attack guy is gonna play here for credits? It delays us quite a bit if we don't play this turn, so I think we go for it. I don't think he's gonna have a way to heal this. I don't think... It's unlikely he's gonna have a way to remove this. I think we just get down another Calliope. And not play War Machine for discard purposes. So as long as he doesn't have, like, prolonged siege here or something, I think we're relatively chilling. So that lets me full clear the board at the cost of a... Ooh. I should attack here first, check for... friendly fire? Cold trap. Okay, that does change things a little bit. So I don't think I'm going to go for the pontoon bridge now. I'm just going to go for these trades. If he has Through the Breach Crossfire, it's a sad day to be alive. How many... I can get a lot of M4A2s if I trade pontoon bridge. No, I don't have the credits. I guess we just air escort. I guess I could, like, feasibly greed on the air escort. That seems wild, though. Doesn't seem that wild, though. Well, it's first... Okay, let's see if it's second cold trap. It's not second cold trap. From the deep? No, from the deep. Okay, I think we just pass. I think we're gonna greed on it. Our opponent passes. So our opponent randomly gonna be running, like, Envelop. 2, 4, 8. Not the credits for it. Alright, how do I not get crossfired here? That's the most important question. I think if we take this trade, we're relatively fine. I guess if he trades and then, like, dive bombing, I don't know. Knowing he's out of comment is such a relief. Sure. He Wolfpack's Panzergren for greed. Speaking of greed, I think I want to trade out this guy. So, 2 credits, draw 2 cards, summon 3 4/4 tanks. Pretty good card. Well, he's on 5 health. Gonna has to Alpenfesting or Leopold. He does not have either. I mean, to be fair, even if he did have either, probably was still a very lost game. And top 15 now, so we're a couple points out from top 12. Not that that is a goal of mine, but yeah, this is the deck. Those are some games on the deck, and hopefully that gives you some idea of how to play the deck. You know what the mulligan's going to be looking like, how the general game flow is when you're playing the deck. And if you like it, let me know. Link to the import code for the deck is in the description. If you don't know how import codes work, just copy the string of letters and numbers and symbols, and then go into your collection, and then it will prompt you to import a deck if you have an import code copied to your clipboard. So, with all of that being said, thank you very much for watching. If you have the means to and the desire to, feel free to donate to my Ko-Fi link down below. Thank you to everybody who has donated. It genuinely does help a lot. And I will see all of y'all in the next one.